What's going on? What's going on, Mr. Josh?
Good afternoon. How we feeling?
Doing all right. Hanging in there. So we got a few people on here.
All we can ask for.
All right, Mr. Josh. So let's. Sorry, something just happened with my phone. That was weird. All right, we're gonna take a look at question one, day two. All right, I can determine how different regions of the United States contributed to the results of the elections of 1824 and 1828. Analyzing source B election data. Source B election data. All right, that's what we're looking at here. So the biggest things to think about today, I think, Mr. Josh, have to do with how the expansion of the U.S. affected elections and affected democracy in the United States. How adding different demographic groups as they expanded territory essentially ended up determining some of the results of these elections that took place. And we have a map here that kind of gives us some insight into the two elections and the differences in the two elections. So everybody who's on, just take a few seconds, take a look at the map. So election data from 1824 and 1828. We can kind of see the differences between what happened in that first election in 1824 and 1828. Keep in mind, Jackson's in the green. John Quincy Adams is in the, we'll call that salmon color, and Crawford's in the blue, along with Clay in the yellow here. Hopefully everybody can see that. Taking a look at the map. We got some questions, and I actually want to go through the questions systematically here. So the first question is, who won the popular vote in the election of 1824? If you guys can drop it in the chat, who does it look like won the popular vote in the election of 1824? Keep in mind at the top here, at the top, we have the electoral vote. We got like the electoral vote right here, and then we have the popular vote down here. Who won the popular vote in the election of 1824? I know there's a lag, so I'm trying to give you guys plenty of time.
And remember, when we're talking about these elections, the person who gets the most votes doesn't always win. The two ways that we vote are we cast a vote and then someone else votes in the electoral college. So you could, in this instance, one person won both, but in other elections, like in 2016, one person wins the popular vote, so they get more votes, but someone wins the electoral college, they get more points, and whoever gets more points wins. So sometimes you have a split there.
Correct. All right, Mr. Josh, we got a few people who are kind of saying some different things here. Do you mind breaking it down for us?
Yeah, so if we can look at that tally for the popular vote, we see that the biggest part of that circle is the green one, and that would be Andrew Jackson. On the map, you can see Andrew Jackson in green. He's got a lot of states. He's got Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Tennessee, Alabama, Carolinas, and some other ones. And this is really important because out of that vote, he has the most, but he wasn't the president beforehand. In 1824, the president, who was a guy by the name of John Quincy Adams, who looked like this, John Quincy Adams was running for president again for the second time. And he was not really liked by a lot of the average people of the country. They thought that he was very distant and that he didn't care about what they believed in. So he did not get as many votes as he did the first time.
All right, pretty good there. Let's take a look at the next question. Where did John Quincy Adams receive the most support? You guys take a look. I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes. Where did he receive the most support? When they ask about support, they're really talking about regions here. Like, where was his support concentrated? There's kind of a pretty clear concentration of where his support is in the country.
And remember, John Quincy Adams is that bright pink color. So to see where people voted for him the most, you should be looking for the pink.
This lag is killing me, man. All good. Drop your answers in the chat, guys. I know there's some lag, so I got to give you guys some time. Where was his support concentrated? Where were the people who voted for him located, according to this map? All right, starting to see some stuff going in. All right. Who can tell me the colony name? Anybody know if we were thinking about the original 13 colonies, what colony would this primarily be? Just throwing that in there as a little curveball throwback. All right, Mr. Josh, help us out.
Good. I'm seeing Mass, so Massachusetts. I'm seeing up north, and that is exactly right. So if we look at the pink for John Quincy Adams, we see that for the most part, except for really tiny areas, all of his people that liked him were up north. So New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Maine. So a lot of his support, a lot of the people that voted for him lived in these areas. But if we look at the rest of the country, he's basically not there. No one really liked him outside of those areas. So because he didn't have the support of a lot of people across the country, he couldn't be president. He only had 1 in 3 votes in the whole country. He had 31%.
And I'm wondering, and I just want to pose a question to the class. What do you guys notice about that's different from our modern day elections? What do you notice about these elections? Looking at the graphs, looking at the charts, there's something that's very different from what we see today. I'm wondering if anybody can make that connection. Just drop it in there. There's a difference between what we see in our elections today versus what we're seeing in this election right here. I'll give you guys a couple minutes to think on it. Come on, lag. Come on, lag. What do we notice that's different from our elections? We talked a lot about elections this year, modern elections versus past elections. But there was kind of a recurrent theme with our elections that you see versus this election. So, Mr. Josh, in our country, we have a two-party system now where you really only have two candidates who get any significant portion of the vote. Here, what I see is you essentially had, once again, two candidates getting the majority of the vote, but you had other candidates who got a significant enough portion that it affected the outcome of the election. For instance, if you look at the 16% that Crawford got, if that 16% would have gone to Adams, Adams would have been the president, correct?
Yeah, and that's a big thing. You talked about parties. So right now we have two big political parties: the Republicans and the Democrats. As Mr. Pugh says, the blue team and the red team. But if we look at the people that are running in this election, there are no parties. These people are running by themselves and on their ideas alone. So it's very hard for them to kind of get people together because it's only them trying to get people to show up. So you have a lot of people splitting off, you have multiple people running, and the more people that run, the less chance it is that someone's going to win off just the votes. Because as we can see, nobody has 50%. So they had to figure it out a different way that we'll get into.
Right. And Mr. Josh, what I also would say is that George Washington would have likely agreed with the way in which these elections were being held, right? George Washington was not a fan of partisanship. He didn't believe in political parties. He thought it would be poor for the country if we had political parties. So I think this election would have been kind of the way that he would have won it.
Yeah. And someone put in the chat, it's more people voting, which is actually something when we go to the next election in 4 years, so 1828, there's going to be a big change in how many people are allowed to vote. They're going to make it easier. So we're going to go from a small amount of people to a bigger amount of people, change the results of what happens. Someone else has put in the chat, so they run for their own beliefs or opinions. Exactly. So because there were no parties, because someone couldn't say, oh, I believe these things, I'm going to do this team or I'm going to go to that team. These people, when they ran for president or they ran for office or tried to support these people, instead of saying I support that team, they had to say I support that person. I like their ideas and what they think, not just what these people are saying. So it was much more specific and a lot smaller, the amount of people that were supporting everybody.
All right, pretty good. All right, so where did Andrew Jackson have the most support? Where did Andrew Jackson have the most support? What region, what area? You could probably make the argument for, well, we know where he had the most support, but he did have support in multiple areas. So where did Jackson have the most support? And what might that tell us about Jackson's belief systems? What might that tell us? Where his support was might give us a little bit of an indicator into Jackson's politics. What do you guys think? Okay, I see somebody posting. It's pretty good. Southeast region.
Yep. Remember, we're looking for the green.
Now, what sort of belief system might someone have who has this type of support in the Southwest region? Southeast region, excuse me. Drop it in the chat there. Drop it in the chat. So, Mr. Josh, he definitely had most of his support in the Southeast, a little bit in the Midwest, but mainly in the Southeast, right? The South. What do you think that might tell us about Jackson's belief system that he had this sort of support in the South?
So if I'm seeing a lot of support in the Carolinas, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Louisiana, that's all in the South. And as we've talked about a lot, as we've gone over with westward expansion and or with the South, a lot of those people supported slavery. So if he's getting majority of the votes in those states, that means that either he is supporting slavery or those people like him for some other reason.
Right. So essentially, we had this divide where in the North we didn't have slavery, and in the South we had slavery. Slavery was legal. So you had this divide where people from the South were more likely to vote for a candidate that they thought would preserve slavery as an institution versus the North, where they thought someone might abolish slavery. If we remember reading about some of how Northerners felt, they were appalled by the institution of slavery, right? They turned their nose up at it, which is why you kind of get the idea of people looking down on one another for their quote beliefs, but obviously it was more than just beliefs because it was affecting real people. So his support in the South came from the people who thought he would preserve slavery as an institution. So that's a big thing to think about when we're thinking about these candidates and when we're thinking about these elections that were taking place back then.
Exactly. And there's something else that's super important about this is that if we look at the electoral vote, because remember, whoever wins the electoral college wins the election. It doesn't matter the popular vote. Did anyone get 50% of the electoral vote, or did they split it because there were too many people in the race?
And you guys are looking at that top circle there. They definitely split that electoral vote, it looks like to me, Mr. Josh. Nobody got to 131, which kind of leads us to our next question here. It says to become president in 1824, a candidate would need at least 131 electoral votes. If no candidate received at least 131 electoral votes, the House of Representatives would vote to decide who becomes president. Examine the results. Who do you think the House of Representatives should vote for? Who do you think they should vote for according to this map? Who do you think they should vote for?
Exactly.
Nobody got enough electoral votes, so Representatives has to choose someone. Who do you think they should choose? Okay, someone says Jackson. That is a Democratic answer, right? Jackson won the popular vote. So if nobody got the electoral votes, he should be president. There's also an argument out here right now, Mr. Josh, that George Bush, who possibly lost the popular vote, as well as Donald Trump, who possibly lost the popular vote, should not have been president, even though they won the electoral vote. So there's a debate over whether we should be using the popular vote or the electoral vote to determine presidents. Now let's look at 1828. You guys take a minute and look at this map. Things have changed significantly. What is the first thing we notice? There's something very different when you look at these two charts, these two graphs right here, the electoral vote and the popular vote. Something very glaring that has changed. What's the first difference when we're looking here? Jackson has the most votes, but there's something else that's super obvious here. So, Mr. Josh, what I notice here is I see Jacksonian Democrat and I see National Republican, and I also don't see 4 people in the race anymore. I wonder why that is.
Yeah, so as I'm saying, there's way more purple than brown. So whoever the person with blue or that purple is, they won. Exactly. There's only 2 people running. And that's a big deal because if we go back to 1824, we had 4 people. And because there were 4 people, no one got a majority. And people started to realize because they had election after election after election where multiple people, more than 2, ran, and they had these splits. And then they decided between 2 elections, if we become a team, if we become a party, we have a better chance of one of our people elected because we're not going to split our votes. We're going to vote for the same person, and hopefully that'll make them win. So
now, I have a question. Oh, go ahead, Mr. Josh.
Yes. So you saw them basically go to 2 teams. We see Andrew Jackson. Remember, he won last time, so he's running again because he can. And he's got some people behind him. They called them Democrats, or the Jacksonian Democrats. And then John Quincy Adams, the guy that lost in 18, he's back again because he wants to Andrew Jackson out of power. And the people
Now, I'm wondering if
People that
anybody can
don't like
tell us.
Andrew Jackson have teamed up behind, and they called themselves the Republicans.
And my question I'm wondering for the class, where did the support from Crawford, where did the support from Crawford and Clay go? Where did their supporters go? We always talk about when people drop out of races, their supporters don't tend to disappear. They tend to go support another candidate. Who do they go support according to this map? I'm just dropping in there. I mean, Crawford and Clay. There we go. Thank you, Mr. Josh.
So if we're looking at
so we had Crawford and Clay. I mean, who did they go support? It's pretty obvious that that those votes that were split were affecting someone disproportionately. Correct, Jackson, right? Jackson gained all that support. I mean, he cleaned up house.
Exactly. So what you saw here was a lot of the people that were supporting John Quincy Adams stayed with John Quincy Adams. A lot of that Northeast, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Connecticut, they stayed with John Quincy Adams. But everywhere else in the country, those people said, you know what? We like Andrew Jackson better. I like his ideas. I'm going to go vote for him.
And Mr. Josh, this tells me something about politics back then. This tells me that either slavery was not on the ballot or the majority of Americans supported it as an institution at this time. You think that's an argument we can make here?
I think that is definitely something we can say, because if we look at the Northeast, the areas without slavery, that's John Quincy Adams, the man who was not as supportive or not as good about slavery. If we look at the South, it's all Andrew Jackson, every single state. So those people who all believed that slavery was good or they were okay with it, all voted the exact same way.
All right. Let's see. Let's keep it rolling here. Well, we know who won the popular vote. We know where Adams received the most votes. We know where Jackson received the most votes. And we also know some of the differences. So let's take a jump here to day 3, Mr. Josh, because I know pacing is a little off here. So let's take a jump to day 3. And remember, when we're looking at text, guys, I want you guys to really, really, really take notes in the margins on your papers so that when I'm not around, Mr. Josh isn't around, you guys have a frame of reference. We're going to go through this and break this down for you guys because we want you guys to be successful. And we definitely want you guys taking notes so you can handle it without us. Oh, look, KDR is here, my favorite. All right. All right, manifest destiny, Mr. Josh. Manifest destiny. You know, we've talked about this topic, and I know this is mainly review, but let me just give a quick synopsis and review of manifest destiny, and then I'll have you jump in, Mr. Josh. That sound good? Hear me? All right, so we had the Monroe Doctrine, right? We had the Doctrine of Discovery way back when that had Europeans come over to the Americas in the first place, right? And it stated that if you were not Christian, if you were not essentially European, your land could be taken. So manifest destiny is essentially the idea that Americans were meant to spread from sea to shining sea, from coast to coast, Atlantic to Pacific, and that they were meant to dominate the Americas. And this is a very important concept in history because Americans pushed west until they couldn't push west anymore. Okay? Mr. Josh, you got anything you want to kind of add to my brief synopsis of manifest destiny? I know we taught it already, but I wanted to refresh everybody's memory. Uh-oh, we can't hear you. Oh, okay.
Exactly. Really good. Oh,
Yep.
Cool. So, as we've talked about, there's this painting that really talks about manifest destiny. It shows all of the Americans, all of these settlers, farmers, and people who are working going west. They're going out into the land that was not part of America yet, and they are bringing the country over there. They're bringing the railroads, they're bringing the electricity, they're bringing what they would call progress into those areas. And as we can see, we had to push some people out. We talked about. We pushed the Native Americans, we pushed Mexico away, and in some cases, pushed African Americans as well.
Right. Now, Mr.
So,
Josh, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So with manifest destiny, like Mr. Pugh said, it's the belief of the people at that time that it was our destiny. It was our purpose to go as far west as we could because we didn't really know what was there, but we thought it was ours to take. So we just kept going.
So, Mr. Josh, this is a very famous image, and I want to do a little bit of breakdown of the imagery here. If you notice, this lady, right, she looks like an angel. We talked about this before. She looks like someone who's divine, right? And the reason why they have that divine figure there is because they believed it was their God-given right, or the God-given right of Americans to expand and take over that land, right? Also, bringing Christianity, she's holding this book. And if you notice, you're bringing this sunshine and this light, and you're pushing away what looks to be like a storm or a dark cloud. And as you see the Native Americans running in that storm, that is meant to represent the, quote, illumination of Native Americans, or as what they would say were savages because they were not Christian. Is there anything you think I missed there, Mr. Josh, you want to add in? I think that's important to note when we're looking at these manifest destiny images.
Yeah, the way that they justified it was that God said so. So she, like you said, she's supposed to be an angel. She's carrying a Bible. And for a lot of these people that were going out west, they thought that they were doing the work of God, that they were bringing light to these areas that weren't lit. So they're bringing the sunlight, they're bringing the good weather over to the darkness. They're bringing it over and making the area better in their eyes.
And it's very important for you guys to know, not just for my class, but just in general in history, you see people make decisions and justify it with religion, okay? Not to say religion is bad or good, but people use religion to justify. We've already seen them use it to justify the institution of slavery. We've seen them use it to justify taking Native Americans' land, and things of that nature. So keep in mind, one of the veils I would say used throughout history that you'll see, even when you get the world history, is the veil of we're doing this for religious reasons, not for economic or financial reasons. But we also knew this is really about money, right? If you have land, you can grow crops. You can dig for gold. There were different things you could do to produce money in the colonies. All right. Manifest destiny, good times. All right, so I will go ahead and read through this briefly. And as I read through this, guys, just follow along. I'll also maybe make a little bit of commentary, and Mr. Josh will give us a little bit of a synopsis and breakdown on the other end. All right, so Source C, Manifest Destiny. It was written by John L. O'Sullivan. We've read this in class, but let's come back to it. The right of our manifest destiny to overspread and to possess the whole of the continent, which Providence has given us for the development of the great experiment of liberty and federative development of self-government, and trust to us is right as that of the tree to the space of air and the earth, suitable for the full expansion of its principle and destiny of growth. That's a mouthful. But manifest destiny, we just talked about, right? The right of our manifest destiny to overspread and to possess the whole of the continent, the Americas, which Providence referring to God or the divinity, has given us for the development of the great experiment of liberty and federative development and of self-government. They're essentially talking about democracy. They're talking about democracy. We're taking this land to spread democracy and spread fairness. Let's see, especially the principle of destiny and growth. You think I missed anything there, Mr. Josh? Anything you want to add in? Uh-oh, can't hear you.
Yeah, so
Call you back.
people are dropping in chat exactly what you're saying. Good? Okay.
All right, let's see if we can get a better connection here. Hey, sorry, Mr. Josh, having a little bit of connective issues. Yep.
Cool. So right before I dropped out, people were talking in chat about bad versus good, about God giving them the support for it. So when we look at that first paragraph, when we look at providence, that word is a name that people back in the old days used when they talked about God. So when they said providence was on our side or providence gave us this, it means that God was supporting them. So everyone that was talking about God or the angels, that's exactly correct. They thought that what they were doing, where they were going, God was behind them. Providence had supported them and given them that stuff that they were about to get.
All right. Once again, guys, if you have questions, thoughts, ideas, post them. You guys are doing an excellent job of posting. I love the commentary. You guys have been spot on today. I guess we did a good job of teaching Westwood Expansion and Manifest Destiny before we left, Mr. Josh, because it looks like we're all over it today. All right, here we go. Our union, whose policy is peace with each other and all the world. Our union referring to the Americas, the United States. The United States is a union. To enlarge its limit to the extent of domination of peace over additional territories and increasing millions. Okay, it is our job to bring peace to these territories. Ironically, Mr. Josh, they're bringing peace to these territories by doing what?
War. They're
War, right?
territories.
Pushing Native Americans off their land, right? You're bringing peace by creating havoc, essentially, which is fascinating. But remember, this point of view in history is written from a American European point of view, right? And that's important to remember. Let me just highlight that. When we're reading our history, unfortunately, we're not reading it from the perspective of Native Americans, African Americans, Asian Americans. We're reading it from the history of European Americans, and understand sometimes what we're reading did not apply to other groups back then, even certain religious groups. Because also, I'm going on a tirade here, Mr. Josh, but in the original 13 colonies, many of those colonies were founded on religious freedom. Yet we saw people discriminate. We saw Catholics discriminate. We saw Quakers discriminate. It was very fascinating, the things that our nation was built on that we still contradict to this day.
Yeah. And that difference between who gets peace and who gets conflict or war is very important, because we remember all of the people that were making the laws, all of the people that were making these speeches back then were white men, rich mostly.
Landowning white men.
So when those rich landowning white men get peace for them, that doesn't mean peace for everybody else. That means war. That means conflict for the people that they have to push somewhere else. As we said, the Native Americans. It means peace for them, means slavery for others. It means that women don't get the right to vote or the right to say what goes on. So the people that write the history, the people that are saying these things, they have one view and they write that view, but that might not be the view of everybody. It might not take into account the other people that live in that area.
And you know, Mr. Josh, there's a lot of sourcing available that can help us. Normally, first-person sources, journals, articles from time to time that can help us understand the perspective of the other side. But it's very tough for African Americans who were not allowed to learn to read and write, right? It was forbidden. For Asian Americans who were not represented at that time, and some people who were learning the language when they came to the Americas, for Native Americans who had a completely different language and really relied on a oral history more than they relied on a written history. It's very fragmented what information we have on these groups of people, unfortunately. But we have to look for those sources and really use those sources when we can. All right, let's see. Let me continue reading here. Boom, boom, boom. All right, sentence 2. It's confidently believed that our system may be safely extended to the utmost bounds of territorial limits, our system meaning democracy, and that as it shall be extended, the bonds of our union, so far from being weakened, will become stronger by the reannexation of Texas to our union. We're taking Texas back over at the earliest practicable period. Nor will it become in less degree my duty to assert and maintain by all constitutional means the right of the United States to that portion of our territory which lies beyond the Rocky Mountains. Our title to the Oregon country is clear and unquestionable, and already our people preparing to perfect the title by occupying it with their wives and children. From the inaugural address of President James K. Polk, March 4th, 1845. Okay. So, sounds like they're saying this is ours, clearly. There's no question about it. There's nothing to talk about it. We will be populating these states. And we're going to bring our democratic system because it's the right system. And it is the only system that can survive and and extend. Now, I do want to ask you a crucial question, Mr. Josh, and I'm going to pose this to the class, so guys, feel free to comment. I think that most people in our country would agree that democracy is the best system. My question is, at what cost do we force democracy on other people, right? Like we had Native Americans who they usually had a chief, right? They usually had a chief who was the leader of their tribe. In Europe, they still have monarchies. These monarchies are kind of what birthed America, right? And in some of the islands, for instance, Hawaii had a queen, right? Before America took Hawaii. Why is the system of democracy, or should the system of democracy be forced on others? And if we do force that system on others, should we not communicate with monarchies? What do you think? It's a very complex question, I think.
Yeah, so at this time, that's super important because as we know, we're pushing west. So if we look at our map of the US at this time, US is in green. We're expanding our democracy west. We're pushing towards the sea. And as President Polk said, we are going to annex Texas. We are going to bring all of this land into the United States. But that area, that country, because it was independent, already had a democracy. They had their own president, they had their own Congress, but we felt that they would be better voting in our country as a part of us.
Hence why they said re-annexation, right? The prefix re meaning to do it again. So they annexed Texas, then Texas became independent again, and then they had to re-annex it. They had to bring it back in a second time.
Exactly.
Now, Mr. Josh, isn't that interesting? Because Texas had its own independent democratic government, yet America still took it.
Yeah, so when we talk about democracy, we also have to talk about defense. Because the ability to vote, the ability to make your own decisions, doesn't mean much if you can be easily conquered or beat in battle by someone else. So the reason that Texas, even though they were independent, wanted to become part of the US is because they were bordering Mexico. Their entire country was bordering the Mexican states, and they were scared that they couldn't defend themselves against the Mexican army.
Right. And there was a famous battle. We talked about Alamo, Mr. Josh. If you can refresh the memory on that. Stop drinking water. I got to hydrate it for this lecture, you know. But the Battle of Alamo is a famous battle, Mr. Josh. You have anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, so the Battle of the Alamo, when Texas was declaring independence from Mexico so that they could be free. The Battle of the Alamo was a battle that they fought that the Texans ended up losing, but they inflicted so many casualties, they fought so bravely that the Mexicans and their army realized that they could not beat Texas, that the Texans would fight much stronger than they could and would fight for much longer than they could so that they gained their independence.
And just a brief observation, Mr. Josh, you can zoom out on that map a little bit. When you talk about westward expansion, I think it's important for you guys to understand that a lot of the southwest region that you see in purple that is now part of the United States was originally Mexican territory. It was originally Mexican territory. Texas, right, at one point, parts of California, New Mexico, hence the name New Mexico, Arizona. Those were actually territory that had already been claimed by a state, right? And I believe at the time a democratic state.
Yeah. The reason that we started to get interested in these areas, so New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, California, Nevada, is because white settlers, through manifest destiny, started moving in to these areas. And when they started moving in, they started making money. In California, they found gold in a few years after this. And we were getting afraid that the white settlers were going to be oppressed by the Mexican government. With that, because we wanted to make sure that they were safe, we also wanted to make money because we saw that gold as something that was very important. We saw their farms, we saw their jobs as something that we wanted to take part of not just the Mexican government. So as we kept pushing west into the Mexican areas, we started to see those areas as our own instead of the Mexicans.
Correct. Great synopsis. All right, we got about 5 minutes left, guys. If you have any ideas or thoughts or anything, I want you to drop that in the comment section so that me and Mr. Josh can respond to them. It can be anything related to history, anything you have a question about, anything you want to elaborate on, anything you want us to discuss, and anything. And of course, you guys always say you can DM me your work, send me pictures, reach out to me if you have any questions. Mr. Josh, I believe, is also available if you guys have any questions. We want to make sure you're supported. You guys have been doing an awesome job of working with us and all that good stuff. Once again, if you're in these sessions, you're getting extra credit, which is boosting your grade. You can, I believe, get your grade boosted up to 2 letter grades. That's pretty good. You can go from a D to a B. So that's pretty good. So make sure you guys are retrieving your packets and turning them in and all that good stuff.
Yeah, on my end, I just want to say y'all are doing a great job. Comments have been great. People tuning in, giving their responses, doing their work. I love it. You guys are making me so proud because you guys are stepping up. I know this is hard, but you're really making it work. And we are just so proud of y'all that you are doing what you got to do and getting prepared for high school because you guys are going to be all set to go.
Yeah, y'all are going to be good. I mean, you learn so much in my class. You're fine. Nah, I am a little tired. I actually had an interview yesterday, guys. Hart's going to have an honors social studies teacher program next year. So I actually interviewed for that job. So I might be the honors teacher next year if I get it. So yeah, I'm a little tired because I had a 2-hour long interview process for that job at Hart next year and all that good stuff. So yeah, I am a little fatigued, guys. And I gotta make my trades. Gotta make my trades. It's just a shame that we couldn't continue our great options trading we were doing during class. I mean, hopefully no administrators on it right now. Uh-oh. Shout outs to the track team, you feel me? Shout out to Arts Wolf, you know what I mean? Shout out to Monty. Shout out to Lonnie. Y'all gonna see me next year. You gonna come visit me. Facts. Come visit me. And bring me delicious treats because y'all gonna have jobs, you know what I mean? So y'all make sure y'all look out for the kid. Mr. Josh, how are you holding up in quarantine, man?
I'm doing good. It's a little tiring up in Silver Spring, up in Maryland, but we holding it down.
Oh,
Live
in Silver Spring, Mr. Josh.
I make it work.
What part of Silver Spring?
I'm about a 10-minute walk from the metro station.
Are
so
you Georgia Ave, like Wheaton area?
Like 16th Street.
Oh yeah. Okay, so you're like right close to DC.
Yeah.
All right, man.
But yeah, I mean, it's a good time. It is a long commute down to Charles Hart, but y'all make it worth it. I'm excited. I'm excited when I showed up every day, 7:45 every day.
Is it possible you're coming back to Hart next year? I heard you might be coming back.
So we actually don't know. We're gonna get our responses back in a few weeks, but it might be a possibility for me. I'm not sure. The second that I know, I'm gonna let everybody know. But that's gonna happen in May.
So if you guys have finished part of the packet, you can still turn it in, or you can send pictures to me. It's all about extra credit. It doesn't hurt you guys, but it can definitely boost your grade. Everybody can kind of have an A, or at least a B who's in this group and who's been logging on. So I gotta actually go collect your work on Monday or Tuesday and start grading it and seeing who's done it and boosting grades and all that good stuff. So shout out to Arts Wolf for that beautiful picture. I showed it to my nieces, and all that. They liked it. So, all that good stuff. All right, you guys. Nice to see you. I'll see you guys again on Tuesday. Mr. Josh, thank you, sir. See you later. Happy trading.
Good work, y'all. Keep it up. See y'all.